The fluorescent lights hum softly across the briefing room. Morning light filters through security-reinforced windows overlooking a classified military installation, the kind of place where conversations don't exist outside these walls. A man walks through the corridor, mid-40s, gray at the temples. He wears a standard military uniform without insignia or identification. His shoes are polished, his posture is perfect, his face is completely unremarkable. He could be a maintenance officer, a courier, a consultant. No one looks at him twice. He enters the conference room where a young captain stands at attention, reviewing classified documents. The captain glances up, not with recognition, but with the measured indifference of someone checking a schedule. "You'll need to wait in the secondary office," the captain says, not looking up. "The conference call runs late this morning." The man simply nods. He doesn't correct him. He doesn't demand anything. He doesn't even acknowledge the mild dismissal with a shift in his expression. He sits in a chair against the wall, perfectly still, perfectly silent. 10 minutes pass. Then the doors open. A 4-star general enters the room. His posture straightens. His eyes immediately find the man in the chair. And in that single moment, that fraction of a second, everything changes. The general's face hardens with recognition, not surprise, recognition. His jaw tightens. He walks directly toward the man, and as he does, the entire atmosphere in the room shifts like a pressure system changing. The young captain suddenly understands he has made a catastrophic mistake. But the man in the chair simply rises slowly, calmly, with the bearing of someone who has been disrespected 1,000 times and found it utterly beneath his concern. The general extends his hand with a grip that carries the weight of classified history. "Sir," the general says quietly, "I didn't know you were coming today." And it is in that single word, "sir," that the room understands it has just witnessed something extraordinary. But who was this man? And more importantly, what had he done to earn this kind of invisible reverence? What operation could mark a man so deeply that even a 4-star general falls silent in his presence? How many critical missions has he run that still remain classified? And why does the military's most honored intelligence officer walk through the world completely unknown? Stay with us. His story demands to be told. The captain watches in real time as his understanding of the room reconstructs itself. The man hasn't moved aggressively. He hasn't demanded anything. He hasn't even raised his voice. Yet the power dynamic has shifted so completely that the air itself feels different. The general guides him to the central conference table, offering him the seat of authority. The captain, who moments ago was the ranking officer in his own mind, realizes he has just witnessed a hierarchy that doesn't appear on any organizational chart. The man sits, his hands fold in front of him. His eyes are calm, intelligent, observant. The kind of eyes that have watched things, seen things that most people never encounter in their entire lives. The general closes the conference room doors. The security lock engages with a soft mechanical click. "We have approximately 40 minutes, the general says, checking his watch. "I wanted you briefed on the Istanbul situation before the Pentagon meeting." The man nods slowly. He hasn't spoken a single word since entering the building. The captain stands frozen, uncertain whether to leave or remain. The general gives him a look, not unkind but absolute, that communicates this conversation no longer belongs in his clearance level. As the captain exits, he does something he can't explain. He turns back and looks at the man one final time, trying to place him, trying to understand. But the man is already looking away, already focused on the briefing documents before him. It is only as the door closes that the general leans forward and his voice becomes quieter still. "They still don't know, do they?" the general asks. The man shakes his head almost imperceptibly. "Good," the general says. "It's better that way." And then, with deliberate care, the general begins to pull documents from a classified file marked with a designation so restricted it exists in only 3 locations on Earth. "Before we discuss the present situation," the general says, You should know that the young officer you just encountered is being considered for advanced intelligence training. His clearance has been approved." The man looks up. "There are some things he needs to understand about this work," the general continues. "Not operationally, philosophically, spiritually even. He needs to understand what it costs." The general pauses, and in that pause, there is something almost like grief. "I've been authorized to brief him using your profile as a case study, with your permission, of course, but that means revisiting the whole history from the beginning." The man considers this. Outside, the installation continues its daily operations. Soldiers train, aircraft land, intelligence flows through encrypted channels across the globe. "How long has it been?" the man asks. His voice, when he finally speaks, is quiet, almost gentle, the voice of someone who has learned that volume is never necessary when you are truly in control. 22 years, the general says, "since you came back from Prague." The man's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Prague, a single word, a single city, and it contains in that moment the weight of something that has never been publicly spoken. "Then," the man says, "perhaps it is time someone understood what happened there, and why."
The general stands. He walks to the window and looks out over the installation, the base that has produced some of the nation's most skilled operatives, the most disciplined intelligence officers, the soldiers and spies who never receive medals because their victories must remain unknown. "Your story," the general says, "is classified at the highest level, but the lessons from it, those are what build better officers. Those are what separate the ones who survive from the ones who break." He turns back to face the man. "Are you ready to be known?" the general asks. The man stands slowly. He has spent 2 decades being invisible, 2 decades of living in the shadows, of existing in the margins, of operating in the spaces between nations where no official record can reach. But now, in this classified room, with a trusted general and permission from the highest levels of command, he understands why he was called back. They are going to tell the truth, or at least as much of it as the world is allowed to know. The general's expression changes. It is the look of a man who has carried classified knowledge for so long that finally speaking it feels like putting down an invisible weight. "Your file begins," the general says, pulling another document, "with a recruitment that wasn't supposed to happen." He sits back down across from the man, no longer an officer discussing briefing materials with a subordinate, but a superior officer maintaining a relationship with someone whose achievements exist in a classification level above his own. "You were never supposed to be in intelligence," the general continues. "You were on track for a standard military career, good record, solid officer, promotable. You would have made colonel, possibly general." The man listens without expression. But then someone noticed something you probably didn't even know about yourself. You had the ability to be invisible, not through camouflage, through discipline, through the conscious control of every micro-expression, every breath, every gesture. You had psychological resilience that the psychiatric evaluators couldn't quite explain. The general pauses, choosing his words with precision. You had the capacity to watch human suffering and remain committed to the mission. Not cruelly, not coldly, but with the kind of moral clarity that most people can only aspire to. In 2003, the general says, the CIA approached you formally. You were 23 years old. They wanted you to enter the agency's most intensive psychological and tactical training program. The general pulls a photograph from the file. It is a young man, barely recognizable as the person sitting across from him, but unmistakably the same person. Clear eyes, confident posture, the look of someone who still believed that the world operated by rational rules. You said yes, the general says, and that decision cost you everything you thought your life would be. The general closes the file for a moment. Outside, a helicopter lands on the installation's eastern pad. The vibration reaches them even through the reinforced walls. What you are about to understand,
the general says, is that intelligence work isn't what Hollywood tells you it is. There are no car chases that matter. There are no gun battles that define victory. Real intelligence is patience. It is watching. It is existing in a foreign country as a person you have had to invent for months or years at a time with no support and no recognition. The general stands and walks to a wall map of the world. On it are marked in various colors of pins locations spanning 6 continents. Your first assignment was Bosnia, 2003. You were embedded as a civilian contractor. Your actual mission was to identify financial networks connecting to militant organizations throughout the Balkans. The general touches the map. You spent 14 months there. You spoke fluent Bosnian within 6 months. You built relationships with sources by being patient, by listening, by never being the loud American, by being invisible. The man, watching this history unfold, does not react, but his eyes follow the general's finger across the map. Your reports from that operation led to the disruption of 3 separate funding streams that were financing terrorist operations. 3 cells were prevented from forming. Dozens of lives were saved. The general turns to face him directly. And when that mission ended, you came home and were debriefed. And then, 2 months later, you were sent to Afghanistan.
The general returns to the table and sits again. But here is where your story becomes different. In Afghanistan, you weren't just gathering intelligence, you were being tested. The general pulls out a folder marked with the highest classification designation. They created a complete legend for you, a false European businessman with connections to private military contractors. You became Victor Rinaldi, and using that cover, you infiltrated a network that intelligence agencies had been trying to penetrate for 4 years. The general leans forward. You were alone. No handler contact for 11 months, no emergency extraction plan. If you were compromised, there would be no official record of who you were. You would have simply disappeared. The man's breathing shifts almost imperceptibly. His name was Hassan Kaysar, the general continues, an operative with connections throughout the region, a man whose network extended into 12 countries. Your mission was to infiltrate his organization, learn everything about his operations, but do not compromise him, do not arrest him, do not alert him to our interest.
The general pulls out a grainy surveillance photograph. 2 men sitting across from each other at a marketplace table. One is unmistakably the operative sitting before him, years younger. The other is Hassan Kaysar. That photograph was taken 3 hours into your first meeting, the general explains. Over the next 8 months, Victor Rinaldi and Hassan Kaysar became associates, not friends, but associates who trusted each other on a professional level. The general stands and walks to the map again. During that time, you attended 3 separate meetings with operatives throughout the region. You identified safe houses. You photographed documents. You recorded conversations using technology so advanced that the audio quality was pristine. The man opens his eyes and looks directly at the general. I was not trying to stop them, the man says quietly. I was trying to understand them. The general nods. Exactly. And that distinction is everything. You were not there to impose American will. You were there to gather truth. And the truth you gathered changed the strategic picture across an entire region.
The general returns to the table. But then something happened that intelligence officers are trained to expect but never truly prepared to handle. The general pauses. The atmosphere shifts. Hassan Kaysar's organization was compromised, not by you, but by a separate intelligence operation. And when the net began to close, Hassan made a decision. The general pulls out a surveillance photograph showing the man and Hassan Kaysar in what appears to be a private residence, but this time the body language is different. He figured out you were intelligence, that you were American, that everything he knew about Victor Rinaldi was a fabrication. The man's jaw tightens. And he chose not to kill you, the general continues. He made contact with CIA leadership and offered something unprecedented, a complete surrender of his network in exchange for immunity. The general leans back. He said that Victor Rinaldi had shown him something, in the way you conducted yourself, in the respect you showed him as a human being, even though you were reporting his every move. He said you showed him something he had forgotten. The general pauses. You showed him that intelligence work didn't have to be cruel, that you could gather information without hatred, without dehumanization. The man stands and walks to the window. He looks out over the installation. Hassan Kaisar requested you for his debriefing, the general says. He would only provide full cooperation if the officer he knew as Victor Rinaldi would be his interviewer. The man turns back. They brought me back from the field, the man says. His voice is steady, but there is something underneath it. I was transferred to a secure facility, and for 30 days I conducted a debriefing of Hassan Kaisar. The general nods. And what you learned changed everything we understood about that network. The man sits back down. Hassan told me he had been working against his own organization for 3 years in complete isolation, reporting their activities to Saudi intelligence, which funneled information to us. The general's expression hardens. He was a triple agent, the man says, but his handler, the man who had recruited him, had been killed 6 months before I arrived. He had been operating completely alone, trying to dismantle an organization from within while maintaining his position as a trusted operative. The man stands again and paces to the window. When his network began to collapse, he made contact with CIA leadership, not to betray me, not to protect himself, but because he was exhausted, because 3 years of living as a traitor to his own organization, watching people he had come to care about being killed in operations he had been setting up for dismantling, it had broken him. The man's voice becomes quieter. And I was sent to document that breakdown. I was sent to be the final piece of his compartmentalization. I was sent to be the one to take the last thing Hassan Kaisar had left, his dignity. The man turns to face the general directly. But I didn't. I spent 30 days with him, and instead of conducting an interrogation, I conducted a conversation. Instead of extracting intelligence from a broken operative, I treated him as a man who had sacrificed everything for a cause he believed in. The man sits back down. By the end of the 30 days, Hassan Kaisar had provided complete intelligence on his organization. Names, locations, methods, plans, everything. And when the debriefing was complete, I wrote a report recommending that his immunity agreement be honored in full. The general nods slowly. Your recommendation was not popular, the general says. No, the man agrees. The director at the time wanted Hassan Kaisar captured, tried, made an example of. But I wrote in my report that Hassan had been an intelligence asset longer than he had been an operative, that his true allegiance had been to his conscience, that executing him would be a betrayal of the very values we claimed to be protecting. The man pauses. Hassan Kaisar was extracted to a neutral country. He was given a new identity and financial resources. He is alive. I do not know where, but I know he is alive. The general stands and extends his hand to the man. That report changed intelligence doctrine across 3 agencies. It created a protocol for handling defectors with dignity, because operatives began to understand that intelligence agencies valued not just information, but humanity.
The afternoon light begins to fade. The general returns to the files and pulls out one final document. But there was one more operation, the general says, after Hassan Kaisar. Prague. That is where everything culminated. The man knows what is coming. In 2005, the general says, we received intelligence suggesting that a terrorist organization was developing capability to conduct a coordinated attack against civilian infrastructure in the United States, schools, hospitals, public transportation systems.
The general pulls out satellite photographs and communication intercepts. The planning cell was in Prague. The individual coordinating the operation was a man named Dmitry Volkov, a former Russian intelligence officer selling his expertise. The general looks directly at the man. We needed someone to infiltrate Volkov's planning cell. A new legend, Alexei Sokolov, a Russian-Ukrainian weapons engineer. You would be inserted with a single objective: delay the operation long enough for us to identify all the cells in all 4 countries so we could conduct simultaneous operations to prevent the attack. The man does not move. You were given 4 months. 4 months to build a legend, infiltrate the cell, gain access to Volkov, and provide the intelligence we needed to stop an attack that would have killed thousands of people. The general stands and faces the window. And you did it. You were in Prague for 118 days. You attended 7 planning meetings. You photographed 43 separate documents containing operational details. You identified 3 separate safe houses where weapons and explosives were being stored. You confirmed the identity of 12 operatives across 4 countries. You did your job perfectly.
The general pauses. But then Volkov brought his daughter to one of the planning meetings. She was 8 years old. She was sick. He was worried about leaving her, so he brought her for a few hours to an apartment where you were being introduced as a potential supplier. The man's expression does not change, but something behind his eyes shifts. You were trained to observe and report, to remain detached, to remember that the mission takes precedence over sentiment.
The general sits back down. But you broke protocol. You created a scenario where Volkov concluded that his security had been compromised. You made it seem like the CIA was closing in. You gave him time to extract his network. The general's voice becomes very quiet. Dmitry Volkov disappeared from Prague with his daughter and 16 operatives. The attack was prevented, not because we stopped at the planning cell, but because the cell scattered. They were never able to reconvene. The attack was stopped by your decision to show mercy to a man who would have killed thousands of civilians. The general leans forward. And you completed your operation by being extracted while the CIA conducted raids on safe houses that you knew were already empty. You maintained your cover. You came home as a hero, even though no one knew what you had done. The man finally speaks. Did the attack occur? He asks. No, the general says. Intelligence analysts believe that Dmitry Volkov intended to conduct the attack in September 2005, but due to the disruption of his network, he never had the opportunity to reconvene. The general pauses. Estimates suggest that the attack, had it been executed, would have resulted in between 5,000 and 8,000 casualties. The man closes his eyes. You saved thousands of lives, the general says, and you did it by betraying your operational parameters, by choosing humanity over doctrine, by treating Dmitry Volkov as a father, not as a target. The general walks to the door and opens it. The young captain is standing in the corridor outside, waiting to be readmitted. The man stands and walks toward the door. As he passes the general, the 2 men did not shake hands, but there's a moment of understanding that needs no words. The captain enters the room again and sees the classified files being secured. He sees the man preparing to leave. He sees the general standing at attention, which is not the protocol for their relative ranks, but he says nothing. He simply understands that something has changed. The man pauses at the door and looks back at the young captain. The work you are about to do, the man says, his voice carrying the weight of classified history, will require you to make choices that the public will never understand. You will be blamed for decisions that saved lives. You will be praised for operations that hurt innocent people. You will spend your entire career balancing between what you were ordered to do and what your conscience demands.
The man's eyes are compassionate but unflinching. "The decisions that will define your career," the man continues, "the ones that matter most are the ones where you choose mercy, where you choose to preserve human dignity even when you have been trained to discard it." The man extends his hand to the captain. "Become an intelligence officer who is remembered for the lives you saved, not for the information you extracted, but for the moments when you chose to be human instead of a weapon." The captain shakes his hand, and in that moment, he understands that he has just been given a graduation from one kind of training into another. The man turns and exits the classified briefing room. He walks through the corridors of the military installation with the same bearing he entered with, invisible, unremarkable, indistinguishable from any other officer moving through the base. But now, anyone who knows the truth understands that they are watching a legend walk away. In the classified briefing room, the young captain stands with the general, looking at the files that have just been secured. "Is his story true?" the captain asks. The general does not answer directly. "The parts I could tell you are classified at the highest level."
The parts I couldn't tell you, the operations, the identities, the full scope of what he accomplished, those remain classified, and they will remain classified long after he is gone. The general closes the briefing folder. "But understand this," the general continues, "intelligence work is not what you imagine. It is patience, discipline, the willingness to be invisible, the willingness to sacrifice everything, your identity, your recognition, your ability to be known in service of something larger than yourself." The general looks at the young captain directly. "If you continue in this career, you will have moments where you realize that you have saved lives that you will never know about. You will prevent attacks that the public will never understand happened. You will make decisions that will seem contradictory. Sometimes you will work to extract truth. Sometimes you will work to preserve mercy." The general pauses. "And the greatest heroes in this profession are the ones who understand that showing restraint is not weakness, that preservation of human dignity is not failure, that the most important intelligence victories are the ones no one ever knows occurred." The general walks to the window and looks out over the installation one final time. How many real heroes walk among us without ever being recognized? How many men and women are sacrificing their identities, their safety, their futures in operations that the public will never understand? How many intelligence officers are making decisions every single day that change the trajectory of history, and no one will ever know their names? The general turns back to face the captain. "That man who was in this room today walked through this installation 4 hours ago, and no one recognized him. No one knew what he had accomplished. No one understood that they were in the presence of a legend." The general's voice becomes quieter, and he preferred it that way. For the viewers, the real war is fought in silence by people you will never meet, using methods you will never understand, for objectives that will never be publicly acknowledged. Intelligence officers sacrifice everything: their identities, their safety, their recognition, their right to ever tell anyone what they accomplished. They do it because national security demands it. They do it because people need to be protected. They do it because they understand that true heroism is the kind that no one ever knows about. If this story moved you, if it made you understand something new about service and sacrifice, then subscribe to Military Stories. We tell the stories that cannot be told anywhere else, the classified histories, the operations that changed the world, the legends who walked unseen. Like this video, comment, who do you think deserves recognition most? The heroes everyone knows about, or the heroes no one will ever hear from? Subscribe to Military Stories for more intelligence narratives that illuminate the hidden truth of how security is actually maintained.
because the real war is fought by people you will never meet, and the greatest victories are the ones no one will ever know occurred.